Welcome back, and thank you so much for being here. I'm Stacy James with Just Spoolin Around, and I'll be demonstrating how to work the 6-stitch braided cable stitch pattern in a small swatch. This stitch pattern is what I consider a short, squatty, comfy, cozy cable. It's the type of cable that works well as a border around larger cables or as an accent for special design. Really, any way you choose to use it, it will add beauty to your project. The 6-stitch braided cable requires a stitch multiple of 7 plus 1, in addition to 1 edge stitch for each edge. The edge stitches will not be part of the stitch pattern, just those in between. In addition to the stitch multiple of 7 plus 1 required for the pattern, plus another 2 stitches required for the edges, there is also a setup row, which will be row 1, along with a 4-row repeat, rows 2 through 5. Now these rows will be repeated until the desired length is reached. Then we bind off in pattern. In segment 2, I'll work the foundation chain along with the first row, which is the setup, so it's not part of the 4-row repeat. I'll be demonstrating this stitch pattern by working a small swatch, running the stitch multiple just once. So we'll need 10 stitches total for the foundation chain. That's 2 edge stitches with 1 on either side, in addition to the stitch multiple, 7 times 1 plus 1 for another 8 stitches between for our stitch pattern. So 8 plus 2 gives us the 10 we need. Now, if I were to work 2 multiples of 7 plus 1, we would need to multiply 7 times 2, then add 1, which gives us 15 stitches. Then we add our 2 stitches for the edge stitches for a total of 17. So that's how the stitch multiple works. Okay, we'll begin by coming up about 4 inches from the tail end to work a 10-inch foundation chain. Now, if you need help working the foundation chain, the link above is a great beginner's guide to hand knitting. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Now let's make sure we have 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to make that last stitch just a bit smaller. Now, let's turn the foundation chain over to work row 1, the setup row, through the back humps running right through the middle so we have a pretty braid to match the bind-off chain. Now, the first and last stitches on every row will always be knitted. Here's the first stitch on row 1. So normally we would knit that, but since we're using it as the first stitch for row 1, we leave it as is. That brings us to our stitch multiple, which will work up to the last stitch of the row, and that last stitch will knit. The plus 1 in the stitch multiple gives us symmetry, while the edge stitches create a beautiful natural border. Now, we know our edge stitch is a knit stitch, but we're going to skip that. So, to get started, we'll purl into this first hump, which will be the second stitch on this row. Then, we'll knit into the following 6 humps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which brings us to the plus 1 of our stitch multiple. For that stitch, we just repeat the first stitch in the stitch multiple, so we'll always purl that plus 1 stitch. Now, we knit the edge stitch to finish up the row. We have just completed the foundation chain and setup row, row 1, for our 4-row repeat stitch pattern. In segment 3, I'll work rows 2 through 5, which will form the 6-stitch braided cable stitch pattern when repeated. We'll start row 2, which is the first row of our 4-row repeat, by first knitting our edge stitch. Next, we begin working the stitches for our stitch pattern. We'll be crossing stitches on this row to start our cable work, but our first stitch is a purl. Next, we're going to cable for front. This tells us we have 4 stitches in this cable, and it's front crossing. We generally skip the first half of our total cable stitches, so we'll skip the first 2 stitches.
Since we have a front crossing cable, the next set of cable stitches must be crossed in front of the skipped cable stitches. So let's cross the next 2 stitches over the skipped stitches and knit them next in the sequence. Then come back to the set of skipped stitches, bring them next in line, and knit them as well. We've just completed the cable for front. Now we'll knit the next 2 stitches, and if we were working the stitch multiple more than once, we would repeat these first 7 stitches. That would be purl 1, cable for front, knit 2, up to the last 2 stitches, which would bring us to the plus 1 in our stitch multiple, so we know to purl that stitch. Then knit the edge stitch to complete the first row of our 4-row repeat. Now, row 3 is our return pass in this pattern. All we do is work each stitch as it presents. So let's knit the edge stitch, then purl the next. Now we should have 6 knit stitches. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now purl, then knit to complete the second of our 4-row repeat. We'll be crossing stitches again on row 4, but first we need to knit our edge stitch. Now purl 1 and knit 2 to bring us to our cable. Next, we're going to cable 4 back. This tells us that we have 4 stitches total to work in our cable, and it's back crossing. Again, we'll skip the first half of our total cable stitches, so let's skip the first 2 stitches. Since we have a back crossing cable this time, that next set of cable stitches must be crossed behind the skipped stitches. So let's cross the next 2 stitches behind the skipped stitches to knit them. Then come back to the set of skipped stitches, bring them next in line, and knit them as well. We've just completed the cable 4 back. Now we're at our plus 1, so we purl, then knit that edge stitch to complete the third of our 4-row repeat. Since row 5 is our return pass in this pattern, we'll work each stitch as it presents. So let's knit the edge stitch, then purl the next. Now we have 6 knit stitches. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now purl, then knit to complete the final row of our 4-row repeat. After working the 4-row repeat one more time, we can better see the braid in this cable.
Now, repeat rows 2 through 5 to the desired length to form the pattern. Then bind off in pattern to achieve that symmetry. I really hope you loved this stitch and found the instructions easy to follow. If you have questions or need any help, please do not hesitate to comment below or email me at support@justspoolingaround.com. Thanks again for watching. Peace out, all you hand knitting lovies. Until next time.